at the governor's apartment. The British governor lived here some years back. And normally when I talk about the British governors, I talk about colonization. It is really interesting to know how colonization started in this country. Let me start with this. Or let's say, interestingly, just 11 years after the abolition of the slave trade in this territory. So in this territory, the slave trade ended around 1833. And just about 11 years later, British rule started. That is on 6th March, 1844, British rule began in this country. And I normally say this, if the Fantis and the Ashantis were united, Ghana would have never been ruled by the British. I've heard of the Fantis and the Ashantis. Like in Ghana, we have so many tribes. We have about 49 tribes in Ghana. So the Fantis, the Ashantis are part of them. So apart from them, there are other tribes too. So geographically, you are within the Fanti area. This is the Fanti land. The Ashantis are about, let's say, 500 kilometers inland. So that's about 200 to 300 miles from here, heading north. So you realize that the Ashantis and the Fanti share a common border to the north. But I can say this, the Ashantis were more powerful than the Fantis in terms of military, warfare and everything. The thing is, the Ashantis controlled about 60% of present-day Ghana. So that tells you how strong and mighty the Ashantis were. But the Ashantis had a problem. The problem was they couldn't trade directly with the British or the Europeans. And you realize that around the 1700s, it was declared that the Ashantis were one empire in West Africa that sold more captives to the Europeans than any other tribe in West Africa. That was around the 1700s. Because the thing is, the Ashantis were more like expanding their empire. And in the course of expanding their empire, they had to fight. You learned empires are fought by war. So they had captives and all that. So what actually happened was the Ashantis could not trade their gold or captives directly to the Europeans, because this time around the Fantis will come in and stop them. So before the Ashantis can trade with the British or the Europeans, the Fantis will get a fee, like a middleman, before they could trade with the Europeans. But this time around, the Ashantis felt that the Fantis were making all the profit from them. So the Ashantis decided to have a direct trade with the Europeans without any interference from the Fantis. So what they had to do was to conquer the Fantis first. Again, the Fantis knew very well that they couldn't fight the Ashantis. So this is a strategy the Fantis adapted. They always run to the British for protection from the Ashantis. So with that, the Ashantis never conquered the Fantis. So that was the opportunity the British got. They said that, okay, Fanti man, you always come to me for protection. Why don't you accept to be part of the British Empire? Then we can protect you very well from the Ashanti. So this philosophy came about, divide and rule. So the British used the weakest to get to the strongest, because all this while the British tried as much as possible to subdue the Ashantis, but they couldn't. The Ashantis defeated the British in battles. There were about 3 battles. One we call Battle of Katamanso, Battle of Formena. All the British army was trashed by the Ashantis. So in order for the British to rule